about a Diddy sex tape.
Oh, wow.
And the rumor mill is like totally going crazy trying to figure out who else is on it with him.
Hmm.
And we've got a ton of sources on this, like from, the first reports that came out all the way to some pretty wild commentary from Diddy's former bodyguard, Gene Deal.
Okay.
So I say we dive in and see if we can figure out what's really going on here.
Sounds good to me. What's really interesting to me is how this whole story is coming out. It started with like just rumors of a tape, floating around
Right.
with people saying the other person on the tape is like totally freaked out about it.
Right.
And we got to remember, this is all just, allegations right now. Nothing's been confirmed.
Yeah.
But then things got really crazy when Gene Deal got involved.
Right. Deal went on that show, The Art of Dialogue,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't even try to shut down the rumors, like at all.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, he made things even crazier with all his own theories.
Like,
He even said that the mystery guy on the tape is bigger than Diddy.
oh, wow. So Deal being involved in all this just makes things way more complicated, As Diddy's bodyguard, he was basically like right in the middle of everything.
Yeah.
So when he talks, people, they listen. It makes you wonder though, right? Like, is he trying to protect someone? Or like, is he trying to shift the attention away from something? Or maybe he's just trying to get attention for himself. Who knows?
Yeah, you're right. You don't hear his celebs inner circle dropping hints like that every day.
For sure.
So I think we need to break down what Deal's actually saying, see if we can figure out what his logic is. He throws out some pretty big names like Will Smith, Nick Cannon. He even mentions Ashton Kutcher and Leonardo DiCaprio, like as part of Diddy's Rat Pack back in the day.
Interesting.
It's like he's playing Celebrity Clue or something.
I know. And it's so weird how he seems to be like ranking these guys based on how famous they are. Like, that's all that matters in this, But what I find really interesting is how he keeps coming back to Justin Bieber. He seems particularly worried about the possibility that the mystery man is white and younger.
Yeah, that's where things start to get a little creepy, I think.
Yeah.
Almost feels like he's judging them based on whose career would be ruined the most.
Right. And it raises all these questions about what's really motivating him to say all this. Like, is he really worried about these guys? Or is there something else going on?
And think about it, right? Like him naming Bieber specifically just adds fuel to the fire.
Yeah, definitely.
It makes people want to, dig around even more.
Yeah.
So is he like accidentally making the problem worse? Or is that part of some, master plan?
I know.
I mean, it really highlights the power dynamics at play here. Like, even though Deal's not Diddy's bodyguard anymore, he still has a lot of pull. People listen to him, and I think he knows that.
For sure.
But let's get back to the names, right? Deal seems so focused on just a few A-listers. But is his reasoning, solid? I mean, are there other celebs out there who are bigger than Diddy and younger that he's, totally overlooking?
That's a good point. I think we need to step back and look at the big picture here, Deal's perspective is just one part of this whole thing. We have to think about the context, right? Like, who was really blowing up in the early 2000s? Who was hanging out with Diddy? Who would have, a lot to lose if this tape ever got out?
This is starting to feel like a real investigation.
It kind of is, right?
We're looking at the evidence, what Deal's saying, the early reports about the tape, and we're trying to figure out what's true and what's, made up.
Exactly. And it's super important to remember that until we have, real proof, we got to be careful about jumping to conclusions.
Right. But let's be real. This stuff is pretty juicy. It makes you wonder, what really happens behind the scenes in, the world of fame and fortune.
Oh, for sure. And I think it says a lot about how obsessed we are with celebrity culture. We're so drawn to these stories, right? Because it's we get a peek into this world that seems so glamorous and dangerous at the same time.
Totally.
But as we keep, digging deeper into this, we got to remember that this is affecting real people's lives.
Absolutely.
So I think with that in mind, we should move on to the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We've got Deal's ideas out there, but now it's time to put on our detective hats and see if we can, really crack this case wide open.
Let's do it.
Okay, so you know what? I think we should, take a step back for a second and think about all the legal stuff and the ethics of this whole thing. If this tape really does exist, whoever is, selling it could get into some serious trouble.
Yeah, you're right. There's way more to this than just some, celebrity gossip. So like, what kind of legal trouble are we talking about here? Like, if someone gets caught selling this tape, what could happen to them?
Well, the laws about revenge porn have gotten like really strict.
Uh,
Like if you share sexually explicit stuff without someone's consent, you could get hit with huge fines
right.
and even end up in jail.
Wow. That's uh that's a pretty big risk. It makes you wonder if like the money they could make from this is really worth it, with all that legal stuff hanging over their head.
Yeah, it's kind of messed up, right? Like people are so obsessed with scandals and they'll do anything to like make a quick buck, even if it means, totally violating someone's privacy.
For sure.
It's just like really disturbing to think that someone would try to profit off someone else's most private moments.
Right. And it's easy to get caught up in the whole like who done it aspect of it all.
Mm.
But we can't forget that there are like real people who are being hurt by this.
Exactly. Whether the allegations are true or not, the damage is, already done.
Right.
Reputations can be like totally trashed in a second, especially now with social media where everything spreads so fast.
It's a good reminder that these celebrities, they're real people too. They have lives and families and all that stuff, just like the rest of us.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, no one else would have to deal with this kind of scrutiny and exploitation.
Exactly. It's like there's a completely different standard for celebrities. Their personal lives are just like constantly under a microscope.
Okay, but let's say, like, hypothetically, this tape is real. Does it, like, change how we see Diddy?
That's a tough one. I think it really comes down to your own, personal values and what you believe. But it does make you think about that whole idea of separating the art from the artist. You know what I mean?
Like, what do you mean by that?
Well, think about it. Diddy's had this like long and super influential career in music and entertainment and, all that. And his personal life, even if it's, not perfect, doesn't necessarily mean that his contributions to like the industry are any less important.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Like, people complicate it, right? And we can, like, appreciate what they do even if we don't agree with all their choices.
Exactly. This whole situation is like a reminder that we should try to think about things in a more nuanced way and remember that there's always more to the story than what we see on the surface.
That's what we're all about here on the Deep Dive, right? We want people to think critically and, like, really explore these ideas.
Absolutely. And as the story keeps, unfolding, we hope you'll stay curious, question what you hear, and form your own opinions.
Yeah, for sure. But hold on. Before we wrap things up, can we go back to those potential suspects for a minute?
Okay.
Deal was so sure it was, like, Will Smith or Justin Bieber. But what if, like, we're totally looking in the wrong direction? Could it be someone else entirely?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Okay, you got to give me something here. Like, what clues do we have, and how do we start narrowing it down?
Well, remember what Deal said, right? He's looking for someone bigger than Diddy and maybe younger. And he also mentioned someone from that Rat Pack era. So we got to think about who was like really making waves in the early 2000s.
Right.
Like who was part of Diddy's circle back then. And, who had a lot to lose if this tape came out.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see where you're going with this.
Right.
We're talking about someone who was on their way to superstardom, hanging out with Diddy, and, like, building this whole brand that could be totally destroyed by a scandal like this.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like we're actually detectives or something. We're already trying to remember who was, like, making headlines back then.
All right, well, let's start with music. Was there anyone who could, like, compete with Diddy in the hip-hop and R&B scene in the early 2000s?
Okay. So we're talking about the time of, like, Usher, Eminem. Oh, wait a minute. What about Justin Timberlake? He was, like, huge back then.
You got it. Timberlake definitely fits the bigger than Diddy thing. He was a huge star all over the world, super popular in music, movies, everything.
And remember that whole NSYNC thing? He was like a teen idol before going solo. So yeah, he definitely fits the younger part too.
And don't forget about his acting career. He's been in like a ton of big Hollywood movies. So yeah, definitely A-list.
Okay, so Timberlake is starting to look like a real possibility here. But what about that whole Rat Pack connection? Was he ever, like, really close with Diddy?
That's where it gets a little tricky. Like, there's no proof that they were, like, best friends or anything.
Right.
But they definitely ran in the same circles and even worked on music together. Remember that Dirty Pop remix with Diddy and Timberlake?
Oh, yeah. Totally forgot about that song. It was a massive hit.
So, We can't say for sure that Timberlake was part of Diddy's Rat Pack, but there's definitely a link there, even if it was just like professional.
This is getting really interesting. So we've got Justin Timberlake, a global superstar, successful in both music and movies, potentially younger than Diddy, and with at least a professional connection to him.
Hmm.
He seems to fit, like, a lot of the pieces.
But again, we got to remember, this is all just speculation, okay? We're just, looking at possibilities based on what we know. It's totally possible the mystery guy is someone we haven't even thought of yet.
It's true. But it's so interesting to see how everything kind of fits together, you know? It really makes you think about all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes in Hollywood and all the power dynamics and secret connections and all that.
For sure. And this whole case really shows how fast rumors can spread and how narratives can just like take on a life of their own,
Right.
especially with social media.
Right. Like one little comment from Diddy's former bodyguard, and suddenly we're all trying to like solve this mystery. It really makes you realize how much we don't know.
So as we, wrap up this deep dive, I think it's really important to remember that there are real people involved here and they're being affected by all this speculation and gossip.
Yeah, you're right. We have to be careful about what we say and what we share, especially when we're talking about something as sensitive as this.
Exactly. At the end of the day, celebrities are just people too. They deserve their privacy and we should treat them with respect. And we should give them the benefit of the doubt, just like we would anyone else.
All right, so we're back, and this whole thing just keeps getting more and more mysterious. Remember, we're trying to figure out who this guy on the tape could be. And Deal said he's bigger than Diddy,
Hmm?
maybe younger, and possibly someone from Diddy's, like, Rat Pack days. We were talking about Justin Timberlake as a possibility before the break.
Yeah, and he does fit some of those things. But I'm not so sure about how close he was to Diddy. Like, would Deal really be that worried about him?
Right, good point. Maybe we need to think about, like, other people who were close to Diddy back then, not just music people, you know?
Okay, yeah. So think about the early 2000s, right?
Hmm.
There was this other, like, mega famous person, always in the news, way more famous than Diddy, even.
Okay, you got to give me more than that. Who are you talking about?
Think about who Diddy was hanging out with back then, who he was working with, even dating someone who was super famous. Like, their career could have been totally ruined if this tape came out.
Wait, are you talking about Jennifer Lopez?
Yeah, exactly. This was like peak J-Lo, Jenny from the Block and all that. She was huge. Music, movies, everything.
And they were like a couple back then.
Yeah.
Always in the tabloids. They were like the power couple of the early 2000s.
Totally. And imagine what would have happened if she was on this tape. She had this like really carefully built image, all about being strong and successful. This kind of scandal could have like destroyed her whole career.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. She was definitely bigger than Diddy back then, and they were definitely like a thing.
Right. But again, this is all just us, guessing. We're just connecting the dots based on what Deal said and what we know about that time.
Right, right. We're just like having fun with it. We're not saying this is definitely what happened.
Yeah, for sure. But it is interesting to think about, all this stuff about fame and like how rumors can spread so fast.
Totally.
Hmm.
It makes you wonder what else is going on that we don't know about.
Exactly. But I think the most important thing to remember is that this isn't just some like fun story. This involves real people and they deserve to be treated with respect.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a good reminder for all of us to like think about the things we say and share, especially when it comes to other people's lives.
Well said. So that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And remember, stay curious.